For most of your life, you've been told that history is settled. The past is known. The timeline is fixed. The textbooks are complete. But what if that confidence is the biggest illusion of all? What if the world you think slowly evolved into modern society didn't evolve at all, but was restarted? Because when you look closely at the 19th century, not through the eyes of tradition, but through logic, engineering, and basic math, something feels deeply wrong. This isn't about myths or fantasy. It's about buildings that shouldn't exist, technologies that appear and vanish without explanation, and photographs that tell a very different story than the captions beneath them. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start with something familiar. Old cities, cathedrals, capitol buildings, palaces, train stations. You've seen them in Europe, in America, in Australia, even in South America. Massive stone structures, perfect symmetry, domes crowned with metal spires, ceilings so high they make you feel small the moment you walk inside. You've been told these buildings were created for beauty, for faith, for symbolism. But that explanation only works until you ask one simple question. Why this shape? Everywhere, all the time. Because if you remove the religious labels and stop looking at these structures as cultural artifacts, something strange appears. Their design doesn't resemble art, it resembles machinery. The domes aren't random, the spires aren't decorative. The metal finials, the lattices, the conductive materials like copper and gold aren't artistic flourishes. They follow patterns, repeating patterns. Patterns that modern engineers instantly recognize. Compare the upper structure of a cathedral with a modern electrical installation, a radio tower, a resonator, a transformer station. The resemblance is uncomfortable. Vertical structures designed to interact with the atmosphere, elevated points capped with complex metal geometry, systems built to collect, amplify, and transmit energy. And here's the part that breaks the narrative completely. It doesn't matter what religion the building belongs to, Christian, Islamic, Orthodox, or something else entirely. The upper architecture follows the same technical logic across continents, cultures, and empires, as if the function came first and the religion was added later. So why don't we see it? Because from childhood we're trained not to. The moment you label something a temple, your brain stops analyzing it. That's not an accident. That's psychology. Once an idea is installed early enough, it becomes invisible. You no longer see structure, you see meaning. You don't question function, you accept tradition. But imagine this. Take the exact same building, same dome, same spires, same metal framework. Place it inside a restricted military base or a scientific research facility. Nobody would call it decoration. Everyone would assume it has a technical purpose. Energy, communication, surveillance, something functional. Context controls perception. Now let's move forward into the cities of the 19th century. According to official history, this was the age when electricity was barely being understood, when power grids didn't exist, when technology was primitive. So, explain this. Photographs from that era show cities filled with advanced infrastructure, massive stone buildings, mechanical systems, urban transport, all functioning, all organized, and yet one thing is completely missing. Wires. No wire lines, no overhead cables, no dense electrical web like the one that suffocates modern cities. Streets were clean, skylines were open, and still technology was clearly present. That alone should stop you cold, because in our world, electricity is inseparable from wires. No wires means no power. That's what we're taught. But the evidence suggests something else existed before wires became dominant. Look at early urban transport. Trams moving through city streets, not pulled by horses, not powered by steam, no smoke, no boilers, no overhead contact lines, and no space for massive batteries either. Yet they moved. Lightweight, quiet, efficient. How? The battery explanation collapses immediately. 19th century batteries were enormous, inefficient, and slow to charge. A single tram would need to sacrifice half its interior just to carry enough power. That never happened. And still, the vehicles operated daily. Then something strange happens in the historical timeline. Instead of improving this system, it disappears. Cities suddenly revert to horse-drawn trams, literal animals dragging rail cars through streets, a massive downgrade. Later, electric trams return, but now they're chained to wires. That's not progress, that's regression. Civilizations don't abandon superior technology voluntarily. They don't replace clean wireless systems with manure-filled streets and expensive copper infrastructure unless something forces them to. So what if energy wasn't transmitted through wires at all? What if it came from the environment itself? Atmospheric electricity isn't science fiction. The Earth is electrically active. The air is charged. The ionosphere is alive with energy. And if you design structures that can resonate with those forces, you don't need wires. You need receivers. Those domed buildings start to look very different when viewed through that lens. Not temples, not monuments, but nodes, part of a global system, an energy grid without cables, power available anywhere the structure existed. And here's the problem with free energy. You can't sell it. You can't meter it. You can't tax it. You can't control people through it. At some point, something changed. A reset, a shift in how resources were managed. Wireless systems vanish, fuel-based systems appear. Coal, oil, gas, wires. Dependency replaces abundance. The old structures remain, but their function is erased. People are told the antennas were decoration, the domes were symbolic, the technology never existed. And within a few generations, nobody remembers anything else. But architecture remembers. Now look at the scale of these buildings. Forget technology for a moment, just look at proportions. Doors 4 or 5 meters tall, handles placed at heights that feel awkward to reach, staircases that exhaust modern humans, ceilings so high they waste enormous amounts of heat. This makes no economic sense. Modern architecture is obsessed with efficiency. Low ceilings, tight spaces, minimal volume. Heating extra air is expensive, wasteful, and yet the past seems completely unconcerned with this. Why? Because maybe these buildings weren't designed for us. Walk through an old palace or cathedral and notice how small you feel, how everything seems oversized, not just impressive, but scaled differently. Columns that could support entire apartment blocks, entrances that feel ceremonial rather than practical. For modern humans, much of this is redundant, overbuilt, excessive, unless the original users weren't modern humans. Across the world, these structures follow the same architectural language. St. Petersburg, Paris, Washington, Melbourne, Buenos Aires. Same proportions, same layouts, same design logic. This isn't cultural exchange, not at this scale, not in an era of sailing ships and horse carts. This suggests standardization, central planning, a global civilization with unified construction principles. A world before borders as we know them. We live in cities that were already here. We moved into them, adapted them, partitioned massive halls into small rooms, lowered ceilings, covered stone with drywall to survive winters we weren't built for. And history tells us that all of this was built by starving workers with hammers and chisels. But the numbers don't agree. If the story we're told is true, then the 19th century should be overflowing with evidence of construction, blueprints, machines, cranes, step-by-step progress. But when you actually examine the photographs from that era, something unsettling appears. Because these images don't look like construction, they look like excavation. Across Europe, America, and beyond, there are countless archival photos officially labeled as the building of great cities. You've probably seen them. Streets torn open, massive trenches, workers with shovels and wheelbarrows. mountains of dirt piled against monumental stone walls. Now pause for a moment and really look. The walls are already there, fully formed, massive arches, finished masonry, decorative stonework. The structures rise behind the workers as if they've always been standing. So what exactly are these people building? Because they aren't lifting blocks into place. They aren't assembling frameworks. They aren't pouring foundations. They're removing dirt, tons of it. Entire city blocks buried up to the windows, sometimes up to the second or third floor. That alone should raise alarms. Official history explains this away with a convenient phrase, cultural layer. The idea that over centuries, cities slowly rise as debris accumulates. But that explanation collapses under basic math. A cultural layer grows by millimeters per year, not in meters. It doesn't swallow entire floors in less than a century. And yet, across the world, we see buildings with windows halfway underground, doors leading straight into soil, entire levels reclassified as basements despite having ornate interiors, tall ceilings, and finished architecture. Basements don't have grand windows and decorative facades. Living spaces do. And the photographs prove something even more disturbing. Workers are digging along facades, exposing full floors that were never meant to be underground. This isn't erosion. This isn't gradual buildup. This looks like sudden burial. Mud, clay, sediment. Something happened. Now look at the tools. Pickaxes, shovels, wooden carts. Against the backdrop of cyclopean architecture, columns weighing tens of tons, arches spanning distances modern builders still struggle with. There are no cranes capable of lifting those stones, no steam engines, no concrete mixers, no mechanical advantage beyond rope and manpower. And yet, we're expected to believe these same people designed and executed engineering feats that still baffle modern architects. That contradiction is impossible to ignore. What makes it worse is what lies beneath these cities. As trenches were dug, massive underground infrastructure was revealed. Brick tunnels, drainage systems, collectors so large a person could walk through them. Perfectly engineered, perfectly preserved. Who built those? Because according to official timelines, the cities above them were only just being constructed. So why would advanced underground networks already exist? The only logical answer is the one nobody wants to say out loud. The cities were already there. The people in the photographs weren't builders. They were uncovering ruins, clearing sediment, restoring what had been buried. Which brings us to one of the most blatant examples where the official narrative completely collapses under its own weight: the Grand Hotel Internacional in Barcelona. According to encyclopedias, this 5-story palace with 600 rooms was built for the 1888 World Expo, a structure capable of housing 2,000 guests, lavish halls, massive staircases, stone construction, imperial scale. And here's the claim. It was built in 53 days. 53. No breaks, no delays, no modern machinery, no power tools, no ready-mix concrete, no cranes, just horses, carts, and human hands. Let that sink in. That would mean fully completing more than 10 rooms per day, finished, plastered, painted, furnished, while simultaneously constructing stairwells, foundations, roofing, plumbing, and decorative stonework. Anyone who has ever renovated a bathroom knows how absurd this is. Even with modern technology, unlimited labor, and perfect logistics, it's physically impossible. Materials need time, mortar needs to cure, paint needs to dry, stone needs to be shaped and placed. Physics doesn't care about historical pride. So what's more likely? That 19th century workers were superhuman? Or that the building already existed and was simply cleaned, repaired, and prepared for the exhibition? And then comes the final insult to logic. We're told the hotel was demolished just 1 year later because it was temporary. Temporary buildings are made of wood, of lightweight materials, not 5-story stone palaces with imperial detailing. Demolishing such a structure would be economic suicide. No investor would fund it. No city would approve it, unless the goal wasn't economics, but erasure. Remove the evidence. destroy the anomaly, close the questions. This pattern repeats everywhere once you start looking. Impossible construction timelines, buildings appearing fully formed, cities emerging from mud. History, it seems, wasn't written carefully. It was rewritten quickly. And beneath these contradictions lies something even darker. Because when you align all the clues, the buried cities, the vanished wireless technologies, the standardized global architecture, it points to a single event, a catastrophic reset. Something in the mid-19th century that disrupted a previous world. A civilization more advanced, more unified, and possibly more harmonious than ours. After the reset, survivors moved into what remained. The old systems no longer worked. Free energy vanished. Atmospheric power stations went silent. New elites introduced fuel dependency, coal, oil, wires, meters, bills. And history was simplified. Dates, wars, revolutions, anything to distract from the gap. But here's where the story becomes truly unsettling. Because some information wasn't destroyed, it was classified. Intelligence agencies don't erase anomalies, they archive them. And leaked documents from closed archives hinted discoveries that were never meant to reach the public. Reports of excavations uncovering enormous humanoid remains, skeletons measuring 3 meters or more. Dismissed as hoaxes, genetic anomalies, convenient explanations for inconvenient finds. But remember the buildings, the doors, the ceilings, the staircases. Suddenly, the scale makes sense. And then there are the reports that change everything about how we understand unexplained aerial phenomena. What if UFOs aren't visitors from distant galaxies, but remnants of an earlier technological age? Surveillance systems, vehicles, autonomous machines from a civilization that didn't vanish completely. Even the shape of the Earth itself comes into question. Classified expeditions, restricted maps, accounts of lands beyond ice barriers, regions omitted from public geography. Whether every detail is true isn't the point. The point is this. Too many pieces align. Too many contradictions repeat. Too many mistakes all point in the same direction. History wasn't merely forgotten, it was edited. If everything you've heard so far is even partially true, then one question becomes unavoidable. Who benefited? Because civilizations don't reset themselves by accident. Technologies don't vanish naturally. Memory doesn't erase itself across the entire planet unless someone makes sure it does. And when you follow the trail of what disappeared, a pattern emerges that is impossible to ignore. Free energy vanished. Wireless power vanished. A unified architectural language vanished. A global infrastructure vanished. And in its place appeared something very specific. Scarcity. Coal mines, oil wells, power plants, transmission lines, meters, bills. Energy, once seemingly abundant and everywhere, became something you had to buy, something you could be denied, something that could be used to shape behavior, economies, and entire nations. That wasn't an accident. A system based on fuel dependency is a system of hierarchy. Whoever controls the resource controls the population. You can't tax the sky. You can't meter the atmosphere. You can't turn off free energy to punish dissent. But you can shut off power lines. You can raise prices. You can decide who gets warmth and who freezes. The disappearance of atmospheric and wireless technologies wasn't just technological regression, it was political. And once that system was in place, the next step was obvious. Rewrite the past. Because a population that knows it once lived better will never accept living worse. A society that remembers abundance won't tolerate artificial scarcity. So the memory had to go. Not violently, quietly. Textbooks replaced engineering with mythology. Temples replaced power stations. Decoration replaced function. Giants became fairy tales. Excavations became construction. Impossible timelines became human achievement. And over time, repetition did the rest. But repetition doesn't turn lies into truth, it only makes them familiar. The most dangerous lies are the ones that feel normal. And yet, fragments survived. They survived in architecture. They survived underground. They survived in numbers that don't add up. And they survived in classified files never meant for public eyes. Declassified intelligence documents speak of discoveries that don't fit the official human story. Excavations revealing skeletons of enormous proportions. Not isolated cases, not deformities, but repeated findings across continents. Beings 3 meters tall or more. Official science dismisses these reports quickly, labeling them hoaxes or misinterpretations. But no serious explanation is ever offered for why such discoveries are systematically removed, ridiculed, or sealed away. Now look again at the old world. The scale, the proportions, the ergonomics that don't fit us. Suddenly, the architecture stops feeling symbolic. It feels literal. And then there are the phenomena we still can't explain today. Unidentified flying objects, maneuvers that defy inertia, technology that seems to ignore our understanding of propulsion. What if these aren't visitors? What if they're leftovers? Autonomous systems, surveillance platforms, vehicles from a civilization that didn't completely vanish but withdrew, or collapsed, or was dismantled piece by piece. And what if we aren't the first intelligent inhabitants of this planet, but the inheritors of a sandbox reset after something went wrong? Even geography starts to look suspicious when examined without assumptions. Restricted zones, Antarctic treaties, expeditions that vanish into silence, pilots reporting land where none should exist, old maps that don't match modern globes, accounts that suggest the world might be far larger than we're told. Again, you don't have to accept every claim as fact. You only need to notice the pattern. Information isn't debated, it's suppressed. Ridicule is cheaper than censorship. If you can make people laugh at an idea, you never have to disprove it. And that's exactly what happened. Anyone questioning the official narrative is labeled a conspiracy theorist, a fantasist, a threat to rational thought. But real science isn't afraid of questions. Only systems of control are. The uncomfortable truth is this: modern humanity may not be the pinnacle of civilization. We may be living in the shadow of something greater, a reduced version of a world that once understood energy, architecture, and harmony with nature at a level we can barely imagine. We don't build cathedrals anymore. We don't build structures meant to last centuries. We build disposable boxes, and we call it progress. We measure success by speed, not durability, by consumption, not mastery, by growth, not wisdom. If the past really was erased, then history isn't a story of advancement. It's a story of recovery. And that changes everything. Because if knowledge was once lost, it can be found again. If systems were dismantled, they can be rebuilt. If free energy once existed, it can exist again. The first step isn't belief, it's curiosity. Look at buildings differently. Question timelines. Check the numbers. Ask why certain questions are forbidden. Because a controlled population isn't created through force alone. It's created through managed ignorance. And once you see the cracks, the illusion starts to fall apart. You don't need secret archives to wake up. The evidence is everywhere. In stone, in steel, in photographs, in contradictions. History isn't just written by the victors, it's edited by them. And the most dangerous realization of all is this: if the world was reset once, it can happen again, unless people remember who they really are, unless they remember what was taken, and unless they refuse to accept a smaller future than the past already proved was possible. If this made you uncomfortable, that's a good sign. It means you're thinking. And thinking is the one thing no system of control can ever fully eliminate.